My boyfriend admitted he cheated. I needed a real woman, he smirked. My friends took his side. I just smiled, took my keys, and left. This morning, my phone blew up with 32 missed calls. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. You know, looking back, I suppose I should have seen it coming. Hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? The warning signs were there, I see them now so clearly. They weren't big, dramatic flashes of lightning, they were more like tiny, almost invisible cracks in a foundation, the kind you don't notice until the whole house starts to shake. They were scattered like breadcrumbs through the last 6 months of my 3-year relationship with Roger. But when you've been with someone for that long, when you've woven your life so tightly with theirs that you can't see where you end and they begin, you learn to make excuses. You learn to give them the benefit of the doubt, because the alternative is just too terrifying to consider. At least, that's what I kept telling myself, even when my gut, that deep, primal instinct we all have, was screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. It all started with small things, tiny shifts in the familiar rhythm of our life together. Roger started working late more often. At first, I didn't think much of it. His job in finance was demanding, and there were always busy seasons, quarters to close, projects to finish. I'd make dinner, eat alone, and save a plate for him in the oven. Just swamped, babe, he'd text. Don't wait up. And I didn't. I trusted him. Then came the new habits, things that were subtle but strange. There was a new scent that would cling faintly to his collar when he finally came home, long after I'd gone to bed. It was a woman's perfume, something floral and expensive that definitely wasn't mine. When I asked about it once, he just laughed it off. Must have been someone from the elevator, Carol. You're overthinking it. And because I wanted to believe him, I let it go. New clothes started appearing in our closet. Expensive shirts, silk ties, things I'd never seen before. Just investing in my career, he'd say. Have to look the part. It made sense, on the surface. But it felt off. It felt like he was building a different life, one that I wasn't a part of. And then there was his phone. For years, his phone had just been a thing, a piece of technology. Now, it was a fortress. It became a sacred object, a third person in our relationship that demanded all of his attention. It was never more than an arm's length away from him, always placed screen down on the table between us. It would buzz and light up at all hours, and he'd snatch it up with a speed that was alarming. I remember one night, about a month before everything fell apart. We were sitting on the couch, supposed to be watching a movie. I leaned my head on his shoulder and tried to hug him, but he was busy texting, his thumbs flying across the screen. I wrapped my arms around his chest from behind, and he physically stiffened, pulling away slightly. Just need to finish this email, he muttered, not taking his eyes off the screen. It was like hugging a statue. A cold, distant statue. The guy's nights became more frequent, too. But when I'd ask who he was with, the names were people I'd barely heard of, not his usual circle of friends. Just some of the guys from the office, he'd say vaguely. You don't know them. It was another wall, another way to shut me out. The breaking point, the moment all those tiny cracks turned into a giant, gaping fissure, happened last Tuesday. It was a completely ordinary evening, which somehow made it all the more brutal. I was in the living room, folding a mountain of clean laundry, the TV humming softly with some mindless sitcom. Roger's phone was on the coffee table, just out of my reach. It lit up, and for a split second, before the screen went dark again, I saw the message preview. The name on the screen was Judith. His boss. The message said, "Miss you already." Last night was. The rest of the message was cut off, but it didn't need to be there. My stomach didn't just drop, it plummeted into a black, icy abyss. Judith. I'd met her a few times at company functions. She was beautiful, sharp, and exuded a kind of predatory confidence. And she was married. I didn't want to be that girl, the one who snoops, the one who invades privacy because of her own insecurity. I've always believed that if you get to that point, the relationship is already over. But this wasn't insecurity. This was a lightning bolt of terrible certainty. It felt like the universe was shaking me by the shoulders, screaming at me to wake up and see what was right in front of my face. I finished folding the laundry, my hands moving on pure autopilot, my mind a chaotic storm. Each shirt I folded felt heavier, each sock I matched seemed to mock the perfect pair I thought we were. I was just going through the motions, a robot in my own home. When Roger got home that night, he was all smiles, completely and utterly oblivious. He walked in, loosened his tie, and kissed me on the cheek. I could smell her perfume on him, stronger this time. It was sickening. He went into the kitchen to grab a beer, acting like it was just another Tuesday. The familiar sound of the refrigerator door opening and closing suddenly grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. I followed him, my feet feeling like lead. I leaned against the door frame, watching him. He looked exactly like the same man I had loved for 3 years, the man I had planned a future with. But he was a stranger. A complete and total stranger. My voice was surprisingly steady when I spoke, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. "Who's Judith?" The change was instantaneous. It was subtle, but it was there in every line of his body. His shoulders tensed. He took a long, slow sip of his beer before turning to face me, using the moment to compose himself. And then he did something I never, ever would have expected in a million years. He smiled. It wasn't his usual warm, loving smile that reached his eyes. This was something else entirely. It was cold, and sharp, and almost triumphant. "I was wondering when you'd finally catch on, Carol," he said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. The casual, almost bored way he said it felt like a physical slap across my face. There was no guilt, no shame, no remorse. Just pride. Judith is my boss. And yes, I've been sleeping with her for the past 2 months. I just stood there, the world tilting crazily on its axis. 2 months. 60 days. He had been living this double life, sleeping in my bed, eating the dinners I cooked, telling me he loved me, all while he was with her. The words were caught in my throat. My mind was just static. He seemed to take my stunned silence as an invitation to continue his cruel confession. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms in a posture of complete relaxation. "I needed a real woman, Carol," he continued, that insufferable smirk still playing on his lips. "Someone with ambition, someone who knows what she wants and goes for it. Not someone who's content to spend her weekends watching old movies and gardening." Every word was a perfectly aimed dagger, designed to hit me where I was most vulnerable. He was taking our life, our shared quiet moments that I had cherished so deeply, and twisting them into a weakness. Through the shock and the searing pain, I felt something else rising up inside me. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was a strange, chilling clarity. My voice was barely a whisper when I asked the next question. "Do Brenda and Dorothy know?" They were my best friends, my pillars. Brenda had introduced us. Dorothy had been my maid of honor in a past life that never happened. Roger laughed. It was a short, ugly, barking sound that held no humor. "Oh, they've known for weeks. Most of our friends know, actually." He took another sip of his beer, enjoying this, enjoying my pain. "They understand. They see that Judith can actually provide me with a future, help my career. It's not just about feelings, Carol. It's about practicality." That hit harder than the cheating. The image of them, my friends, sitting around, having brunch, sharing knowing glances while I talked about my future with Roger. Watching me, probably pitying me, maybe even laughing behind my back. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it was almost hard to comprehend. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I opened my group chat with Brenda and Dorothy, the one named Besties for Life. The irony was sickening. My fingers fumbled on the screen as I typed, "Is it true? You all knew about Roger and Judith?" The response came almost immediately. The three little dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. First from Brenda, "Carol, you know we love you, but you have to admit you and Roger have been drifting apart for a while. He deserves to be happy." Then Dorothy, a moment later, "We didn't want to hurt you. But maybe this is the wake-up call you need to focus on yourself more. We were going to tell you." Sure you were. I looked up from my phone, my vision blurring with unshed tears. Roger was watching me, that same smug, self-satisfied smirk still plastered on his face. He was waiting for the explosion. He wanted the drama, the tears, the screaming match. He wanted a scene he could tell everyone about later, painting me as the crazy, emotional ex-girlfriend. Poor, immature Carol, losing her cool. And in that moment, something inside me snapped into place. The hurt and the shock were still there, a roaring inferno in my chest, but they were being encased in a layer of ice-cold resolve. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead of screaming, I smiled. A real, genuine smile that seemed to catch him completely off guard. His own smirk faltered for a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Without saying another word, I turned and walked to our bedroom. I pulled my old go bag from the top of the closet, the one I always kept packed for weekend trips. I threw in my laptop, my chargers, and the few pieces of jewelry that mattered to me, a necklace from my grandmother, a bracelet my mom gave me. I walked to the front door and grabbed my keys from the little ceramic bowl on the table, the one we bought together on our first anniversary. When I passed through the kitchen again, Roger was staring at me, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Where are you going?" he demanded, his voice finally losing its smug edge. "Out," I replied simply. I paused at the door and looked back at him, the man I thought I would spend my life with, and I saw him for what he truly was, a weak, cruel stranger. "And Roger? Keep the apartment. Keep all of it. I'm sure Judith can help you with the rent." I heard him start to say something, my name maybe, as I closed the door behind me, the decisive click of the lock echoing in the hallway. But I didn't stop to listen. My phone was already buzzing in my pocket, messages from our so-called friends probably trying to spin their betrayal into some kind of misguided kindness. I didn't care. As I walked to my car and drove away into the night, the streetlights blurring past, I turned my phone off. A profound silence filled the car, and with it came a feeling I didn't expect at all. Relief. A deep, soul-shaking sense of relief. Sometimes, losing everything shows you exactly what you never really had in the first place. I had no idea where I was going, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was finally heading in the right direction. I drove for what felt like hours, with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put as much distance as possible between myself and that apartment, that life that had just been exposed as a complete fraud. The city lights eventually faded, replaced by the dark, lonely stretches of the highway. I finally saw a glowing sign piercing the blackness, the Starlight Inn. It was one of those old, single-story motels you see in movies, a bit worn around the edges but with a certain charm. More importantly, the vacancy sign was lit. Right then, that was all that mattered. The man at the front desk was older, with a kind, weary face and glasses perched on the end of his nose. He introduced himself as Pete. I must have looked a sight, standing there under the buzzing fluorescent lights with my puffy, red-rimmed eyes and my hastily packed bag. I fumbled with my credit card, trying to hold myself together, to project an aura of normalcy I was nowhere near feeling. I didn't offer any explanation for my late-night arrival, but he seemed to understand. "Rough night, huh?" he said gently, not with pity, but with a simple, human understanding. I just nodded, afraid that if I tried to speak, I'd start sobbing again. He gave me a key to a room at the very back, away from the road noise, and even knocked $20 off the weekly rate without me asking. "Everyone needs a break sometimes," was all he said. The room was simple, clean, and blessedly anonymous. It had a bed with a stiff, patterned bedspread, a small, humming television, and a faint smell of disinfectant that felt like a clean slate. As soon as I closed and bolted the door, the dam broke. The composure I had clung to so desperately in front of Roger crumbled. I sat on the edge of that unfamiliar bed and cried. I cried for the 3 years I had lost, for the man I thought I knew, for the friends who had stabbed me in the back. I cried for the future I had planned, the house, the dog, the family, that had just vanished into thin air. I cried until I had no tears left, my body aching with the force of it, and then I fell into a deep, dreamless, and utterly exhausted sleep. I kept my phone off for 2 whole days. It was a strange feeling, being so completely disconnected in a world that's always on. It was like the world had paused, and for those 48 hours, all I had was the quiet of that motel room and the loud chaos of my own thoughts. I took long, scalding showers, letting the hot water wash away. I don't know what. I watched old black and white movies on the fuzzy TV, losing myself in stories that weren't mine. I drank terrible, bitter coffee from the in-room machine and lived off snacks from the vending machine down the hall. It was a strange sort of limbo, a period of quiet grief before the real storm hit. On the 3rd morning, I woke up feeling, not better, but different. The raw, open wound of the betrayal had started to scar over into a dull ache. I knew I couldn't hide forever. With a deep, steadying breath, I turned my phone back on. It was like opening a floodgate. The device buzzed and whirred in my hand for nearly a full minute, vibrating violently against my palm as it was bombarded with notifications. 32 missed calls. 47 text messages. Most were from Roger, a handful from Brenda and Dorothy, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. But what really caught my attention, what made my blood run cold, was the storm of notifications from social media. It seemed Roger and Judith hadn't just been trying to contact me. They had been busy. Very, very busy. Roger's Instagram, which had once been filled with pictures of us, was now a carefully curated shrine to his newfound freedom and victimhood. He had posted a picture of himself looking thoughtful, staring out a window, with a long caption about surviving a toxic relationship and the importance of choosing your own happiness. He wrote about being constantly criticized and controlled, and how he was finally learning to breathe again. Each post was filled with hundreds of sympathetic comments, including ones from people I thought were my friends. Brenda commented, "So glad you're finally free, Rog. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Dorothy added, "Stay strong. The truth always comes out in the end." The crown jewel of their public relations campaign was a tearful video Judith had posted to her own professional networking page. She was a master of manipulation. She didn't mention my name, of course, but it was painfully obvious who she was talking about. She spoke with a shaky voice about the heartbreak of watching a dear colleague and friend suffer through a toxic and emotionally abusive relationship. She claimed I had financially abused Roger by making him split all our bills 50-50 while I supposedly hoarded my money for myself. This was a particularly vicious lie, considering I earned less than him and he was the one who had insisted on that arrangement from the very beginning, claiming it was more modern and fair. He'd framed it as being progressive, now I saw it was just another way to control the narrative. Just as I was trying to process this coordinated character assassination, a text came in from Eileen, a coworker I'd known for years. We weren't close, but we were always friendly. We'd chat by the coffee machine, complain about deadlines. Her message was short and to the point, "Hey Carol, you might want to check your work email. Something's going around the office about you." My heart sank into my shoes. I opened my email with a sense of dread, and there it was. A company-wide memo from HR about creating a safe and respectful workplace environment, with a thinly veiled reference to recent concerning behaviors from certain employees outside of work hours that may reflect poorly on our corporate values. No names were mentioned, but the timing wasn't subtle. They weren't just trying to ruin my personal life, they were coming for my livelihood, too. I should have been furious. I should have been screaming. But instead, I just felt a strange, detached, almost clinical curiosity. How far would they actually take this? Pretty far, as it turned out. A few days later, the walls of the motel room felt like they were closing in, so I drove to a local coffee shop, one of my old favorites. It was a cozy place I figured would be safe, since Roger always said their coffee was too weak. I was wrong. The barista, a young woman who had always been friendly and chatty with me, gave me a look that was pure ice. She took my order with single-word answers, her mouth set in a thin, disapproving line, and practically threw my change on the counter. I sat in a corner, feeling like every eye was on me. I later found out from Eileen that Roger and Judith had become regulars there, holding hands over lattes and sharing their tragic survival story with anyone who would listen. The real turning point, however, came unexpectedly, in the most mundane of places. I needed to pick up some winter clothes from a storage unit I rented on the edge of town. As I was leaving, wheeling a small box of sweaters towards my car, I nearly ran into Sharon, a woman from Judith's social circle. I'd met her a few times at parties. She always seemed nice, but timid, always hovering in the background. She saw me and her eyes widened in panic. She glanced around nervously, as if she was afraid of being seen talking to me. "Carol," she whispered, her voice urgent as she pulled me into the narrow, shadowy space between two rows of orange metal doors. "You need to be really, really careful." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "It's Judith," she said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the facility's ventilation system. "Her husband, Arthur, he's connected. Like, really connected. Powerful family, old money. And Judith's been telling him you're unstable. Dangerous, even. She's trying to paint you as some kind of stalker, someone who couldn't handle the breakup." My mind was reeling. Why was she telling me this? Why risk Judith's wrath? It was as if she read my thoughts. "Because," she continued, her eyes darting around again, "this isn't the first time. Before you and Roger, there was another employee at the company. A woman named Patricia. Judith and Roger, they did the exact same thing to her. They destroyed her reputation completely. She ended up having a nervous breakdown and leaving town. That conversation changed everything. This wasn't just a messy breakup anymore. This was a pattern. This was something predatory, calculated, and terrifyingly familiar to them." That night, back in my motel room, I wasn't crying anymore. I was digging. I spent hours online, searching for any trace of this Patricia. I searched legal records, old social media posts, anything I could find. And there she was. Or rather, the ghost of her. Her online presence, her professional profiles, everything vanished completely around the time Roger started at the company. The next morning, as if on cue, I got a call from my old landlord. He sounded apologetic and deeply uncomfortable. He told me Roger had called him, trying to get my name removed from the lease immediately, claiming I'd abandoned the property. When the landlord told him there was a legal process for that, Roger's story changed. He told him I'd been making threatening calls and that he feared for his safety. My landlord called to warn me. He told me his own sister had been through a nasty divorce years ago, and my story sounded all too familiar. While all this was happening, a different kind of notification popped up on my phone. It was a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was of a man in his late 50s, distinguished, wearing an expensive-looking suit, standing in what looked like a library. The message was simple, direct, and sent a chill down my spine. "I believe we need to talk about my wife and your boyfriend. Coffee tomorrow?" It was signed, Arthur J. I stared at the message, the screen glowing in the dark motel room. Something told me Roger's story about needing a real woman was about to get a whole lot more complicated. And the funny thing was, watching Roger and Judith spin this elaborate, venomous web of lies, seeing our friends choose sides based on nothing but their word, it was actually liberating. Every nasty post, every fake tear, every manipulated story just confirmed what I already knew deep down. I wasn't losing anything worth keeping. The next morning, I drove downtown to meet Arthur. He had suggested a quiet, upscale cafe, the kind of place with dark wood, soft leather chairs, and an atmosphere that encouraged hushed, serious conversations. I arrived 10 minutes early, my nerves a jangled mess. My hands were wrapped tightly around a coffee cup, more for something to hold on to than for the warmth. I had no idea what to expect. Was this a trap? Was he here to threaten me, to tell me to stay away from his wife? The possibilities ran through my mind, each one more daunting than the last. Arthur arrived exactly on time. He was just as he appeared in his profile picture, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. He didn't radiate anger or emotion. He radiated control. He sat down, ordered an espresso with a quiet, polite word to the waitress, and then turned his full attention to me. There was no small talk. "Thank you for meeting me, Carol," he said, his voice even and steady. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. I am well aware of my wife's extracurricular activities. Mr. Roger is not the first, and I suspect, given Judith's patterns, he will not be the last." I was so taken aback by his bluntness that I could only stare at him. "Then, why are you meeting with me?" I finally managed to ask. "Because," he said, taking a small, deliberate sip of his espresso, "this time is different. This time, it involves a coordinated effort to destroy someone's professional reputation and personal life. Slander. Defamation. Potential tortious interference. And that, I cannot abide." He explained, in that same calm, measured tone, that he had known about Judith's affairs for years. He had tolerated them, seeing them as desperate, pathetic symptoms of a dying marriage. They had stayed together for appearances, for the sake of their complex, shared business interests. But this, what they were doing to me, what they had done to Patricia, crossed a line from personal betrayal into something more insidious. "My wife is ambitious to a fault," Arthur continued, steepling his fingers on the table. "And your ex-boyfriend, Roger, is a willing and pathetic accomplice, eager for the promotion he believes she can give him. Together, they have a pattern. They identify a target within the company, someone who is either a threat to Judith's ascent or simply inconvenient. Then Judith uses an employee, like Roger, to help push that person out through a campaign of slander and harassment." It all clicked into place, every confusing piece of the last few weeks. Patricia. The HR memo. The whispers at the office. It wasn't just a messy breakup, it was a corporate assassination, and I was the target. "I've been collecting evidence for months," Arthur said. It wasn't a confession, it was a statement of fact. He slid a sleek, thin tablet across the polished table towards me. "For my own purposes. For the inevitable and long overdue divorce." I hesitantly picked up the tablet. The screen lit up to show a meticulously organized collection of files, each with a clear, damning label. There were emails between Judith and Roger, with subject lines like performance review strategy and handling the Carol situation, where they plotted how to frame a negative performance review for another colleague who was competing with Roger. There were falsified expense reports, where Judith had claimed expensive business dinners with clients, but Arthur had attached credit card statements and hotel receipts showing they were actually romantic getaways with Roger. He had everything. He even had security footage from the company parking garage, time-stamped, showing them arriving and leaving together at odd hours. It was a mountain of irrefutable evidence, a detailed chronicle of their deceit, both personal and professional. "This is unbelievable," I breathed, scrolling through the files. "It is business," Arthur said flatly. "And they have been conducting it very poorly. Their actions have exposed the company, a company in which I am a majority shareholder, to significant legal risk. This affects my bottom line, Carol. And it offends my sense of order." He paused, and his gaze seemed to soften for just a moment. "But I am missing one final piece. I have proof of their professional misconduct, of their affair. But to truly end this, I need public exposure. I need a catalyst that forces the board of directors to act swiftly and decisively, without giving Judith the chance to spin this and talk her way out of it, which she is very, very good at. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on mine. The annual company gala is next Friday. I immediately recoiled, shaking my head. No. I can't. I can't go there. Why would I ever put myself through that? The thought of walking into that room, of facing all those people who had judged me, of seeing Roger and Judith parading around like a power couple, made me feel physically sick. Because your presence will be the catalyst, Arthur explained patiently. They will not expect it. They believe they have successfully isolated you. They have painted you as unstable, emotional, and defeated. When you walk into that room, looking calm, composed, and strong, their entire narrative will begin to crumble. They will overreact. They will panic. And they will expose themselves. He gave me the business card of his lawyer, a woman named Ms. Davis. She is a shark, he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Call her. She will advise you on your own potential slander and defamation claims. This has impacted your career, your reputation, your future salary prospects. You deserve to be compensated for that. I sat there for a long time after he left, the tablet feeling heavy in my lap. My first instinct was still to run. To take this information, disappear, and try to start over somewhere new, just like Patricia had been forced to do. But then I thought about them, so smug and confident in their web of lies. I thought about Brenda and Dorothy, and all the others who had so easily believed the worst of me. I thought about Patricia, alone and broken. Arthur was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. Running away would be letting them win. It would mean they could do this again, and again, to someone else. A new feeling started to take root inside me, pushing aside the fear and the hurt. It was a cold, hard knot of determination. I wasn't going to run. I was going to stand my ground. I picked up my phone, my hand no longer shaking. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an ally. And we had a plan. My meeting with Ms. Davis a few days later solidified my resolve. She was exactly as Arthur had described, sharp, direct, and utterly confident. We sat in her high-rise office, the city spread out below us, and she walked me through the legalities. She validated my anger, telling me in no uncertain terms that what had been done to me was illegal. For the first time, I felt like I had real power on my side. As Arthur had said when he was leaving the cafe, sometimes, the best revenge is not to seek it. It's to step back and give people a grand enough stage to destroy themselves. Next Friday, the stage would be set. And I would be there, in the front row, to watch the curtain fall. The week leading up to the gala was a strange mix of quiet preparation and internal turmoil. On the one hand, I was meeting with Ms. Davis, Arthur's formidable lawyer, who was meticulously building a case that made me feel empowered and protected. She walked me through every piece of evidence, explaining the legal ramifications of Judith and Roger's actions. For the first time, my pain and humiliation were being translated into a language of power, defamation, conspiracy, tortious interference. It felt like someone was finally handing me a shield and a sword. On the other hand, when I was alone in my motel room at night, the fear would creep in. Could I really do this? Could I walk into a room full of people who either hated me or pitted me, and face the two people who had tried to destroy me? I spent a lot of time just being quiet, trying to build a wall of resolve inside myself. Pete, the motel owner, became a silent guardian. He'd check in on me, leaving a newspaper outside my door in the morning or offering a fresh pot of coffee from the office. He never pried, but his quiet, consistent support was a lifeline. He told me once, as I was staring blankly at the TV in the lobby, "You've got a strong chin, kid. Means you can take a punch. You'll be all right." I held on to those words like a mantra. The night of the gala, I felt a strange, electric mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had gone out and bought a new dress. It was a simple but elegant dark blue sheath, the most expensive piece of clothing I had ever owned. As I zipped it up, it felt less like fabric and more like armor. I did my hair and makeup with shaking hands, but when I was done, I looked at the woman in the mirror. I didn't see the heartbroken, defeated victim who had fled her apartment 2 weeks ago. I saw someone else. Someone I didn't quite recognize, but someone I wanted to be. She looked strong. I arrived late, exactly as Arthur had suggested. The party was in full swing, held in the grand ballroom of the most opulent hotel in the city. The room was a sea of glittering gowns and dark tuxedos, filled with the loud hum of chatter, forced laughter, and the constant clinking of champagne glasses. I stood in the grand entryway for a moment, my heart pounding in my ears. Then, I took a deep breath and walked in. The effect was instantaneous and more dramatic than I could have imagined. A ripple of silence spread out from the doorway like a shockwave as people noticed me. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned. A wave of whispers followed in my wake. I walked slowly, deliberately, my head held high, my gaze fixed straight ahead. I saw Roger first. He was standing with a group of colleagues, a drink in his hand, laughing boisterously at something someone had said. His eyes met mine across the room, and the laughter died on his lips. The glass in his hand seemed to freeze halfway to his mouth. His face, flushed with alcohol and good cheer, went completely pale. Then I saw Judith. She was holding court near the bar, looking regal and untouchable in a glittering silver gown. She followed Roger's terrified gaze, and when she saw me, her perfectly painted smile tightened into a thin, hard, blood-red line. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. But the most beautiful part? I didn't have to do a thing. I didn't have to say a word. I just stood there, calm and composed, and let their carefully constructed narrative fall to pieces all on its own. The whispers grew louder. I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, trying to reconcile the composed, elegant woman in the blue dress with the unstable, crazy ex from the stories they had been told. As planned, I made my way to a quiet corner near the stage, where Eileen, my coworker, was waiting for me. She gave me a small, encouraging nod, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. The plan was in motion. The first to approach, as we knew she would, was Dorothy. One of my former best friends. She was clearly several glasses of champagne in, her steps unsteady as she marched towards me, a self-righteous warrior coming to defend her fallen friend's honor. "You have some nerve showing your face here, Carol," she slurred, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of everyone nearby. "After everything you put Roger through." I just smiled faintly, a calm, sad little smile. "Everything I put him through?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear, forcing people to lean in to hear. "That's interesting, Dorothy. Tell me more." My lack of a reaction, my refusal to engage in a messy, drunken scene, seemed to infuriate her. She opened her mouth to say more, to launch into another tirade, but that's when Eileen stepped in, right on cue. "Actually, Dorothy," Eileen said, her voice surprisingly firm and carrying across the room, "I think we'd all be very interested to hear the real story." And that was the signal. On the other side of the ballroom, Arthur was talking to the AV technician. He had been complaining good-naturedly for the last 10 minutes about an issue with the slideshow of company achievements that was supposed to be playing on the 2 large projector screens flanking the stage. With a few clicks on a laptop, Eileen's laptop, which she had conveniently left on the podium earlier, the screen flickered. The corporate logo and the smiling face of the CEO disappeared. In its place, a screenshot of a text message appeared, projected 10 feet high for the entire room to see. It was from Roger to Judith. "She's so naive. She has no idea. Can't wait for tonight." A collective gasp went through the room. The screen flickered again. Another screenshot, this time from Judith to Roger, "Just keep her calm until the bonus reviews are done. Then you can drop her. I'll handle the rest." We need Patricia's desk for you. The mention of another woman's name, a former employee, sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the crowd. Then another slide. An expense report for a $500 dinner for client entertainment, signed by Judith, right next to a hotel receipt for the same night, for a suite booked under Roger's name. The lie was so blatant, so arrogant. It was like watching dominoes fall in excruciating slow motion. The slideshow continued, a relentless stream of their own words, their own lies, their own contempt, laid bare for all their colleagues and superiors to see. I saw Brenda's face in the crowd, pale with shock and dawning horror as she realized she had backed the wrong side. I saw the furious, stony faces of the senior management team. Judith's composure finally shattered completely. She tried to maintain control, to laugh it off as some kind of technical glitch, a tasteless prank. But her voice was shrill with panic. The real show, however, came from Roger. He had been filming everything on his phone, a pathetic attempt to prove his loyalty to Judith, I suppose. But as the evidence mounted, he turned on me, his face contorted in a mask of pure, desperate fury. "You did this," he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me, his voice cracking. "You and that bitter old man, trying to ruin everything." And then, Judith, in a moment of sheer, unadulterated desperation, made her final, fatal mistake. She ran towards me, her silver gown shimmering, her eyes wild with a feral rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the now silent ballroom. "You can't destroy what we have. He loves me. Roger loves me. We're going to have a life together." That was the moment Arthur chose to step forward. He walked calmly to the center of the room, taking the microphone from the stunned event host. He looked at his wife, not with anger, but with a kind of weary, surgical finality. "Actually, Judith," he said, his voice amplified throughout the massive, silent room, "the only thing you and Mr. Roger will be sharing is a lawyer. Because as of this morning, I have filed for divorce." The silence in that room was absolute. It was the silence of a story ending, of a carefully constructed world turning to dust. It was the silence of a curtain falling on a very, very bad play. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you gave me a like, and it tells me you're right here with me on this journey. Your support means the world to me and encourages me to keep going. Please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The fallout from that night was swift, brutal, and more complete than I could have ever imagined. The party ended abruptly, not with a bang, but with a quiet, shocked exodus. People just melted away, avoiding eye contact, desperate to distance themselves from the train wreck they had just witnessed. Within 48 hours, both Roger and Judith received phone calls from the head of human resources and were asked to resign from their positions, effective immediately. They weren't given a choice. But that was just the beginning. The slideshow at the gala was just the public preview. The following Monday morning, Arthur presented his entire, meticulously organized dossier of evidence to the company's board of directors. As he had predicted, they were less concerned about the affair itself, these things happen, after all, and more horrified by the clear, documented pattern of workplace harassment, financial misconduct, and the massive legal liability Judith and Roger had exposed the company to. The company's legal team, fearing a massive scandal, moved fast. Both of them are now facing civil lawsuits from the company for misuse of company funds and creating a hostile work environment. Then something truly beautiful happened. Something that made this whole ordeal feel worthwhile. Remember Patricia? The woman who had been forced out of town, her spirit and reputation shattered? It turns out she had moved a few states away and was trying to rebuild her life. She had been following everything through a few old, trusted colleagues. Arthur's lawyer, the formidable Ms. Davis, reached out to her. 3 days later, Patricia flew back into town. She, too, had kept records. She had saved every threatening email, every manipulative text, a whole file documenting the smear campaign they had run against her. She just hadn't known what to do with it all, who to turn to, until now. She and I met for coffee, and for 2 hours, we just talked. We shared our stories, and in her eyes, I saw my own pain reflected back at me. It was a profoundly healing moment. With the full backing of Arthur's legal team, Patricia filed her own lawsuit against Judith, Roger, and the company. Her story opened the floodgates. Her courage was contagious. 2 other former employees, both women who had left the company under mysterious circumstances in the past few years, came forward. Each had their own stories of harassment and manipulation at the hands of Judith and her various accomplices. What started as my personal nightmare quickly became an avalanche of accountability that was burying them both. Roger tried to get ahead of it, of course. In a final, desperate act, he posted a tearful video online from his parents' basement, claiming he was the real victim. He spun a tale of being a young, impressionable man who was manipulated by a powerful, predatory older woman, and that he was now being unfairly persecuted. It was a pathetic performance, and it might have even worked on some people, if it weren't for Sharon. The quiet, timid woman who had warned me in the storage facility finally found her voice. She posted screenshots of her private chats with Judith, the ones where Judith bragged about her conquests and meticulously planned how to destroy people's reputations. The ones where she openly mocked her victims, including Roger, calling him her useful little toy. Last week, the final act of this pathetic drama played out. I was at work when I got a call from Pete, the owner of my motel. "Hey kid," he said, his voice low and serious. "That fella you told me about? The ex? He's here, making a scene in the parking lot." I took my time driving back. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't even angry. I just felt tired of him. I found Roger sitting on the hood of my car, looking disheveled and frantic. He had driven all this way. He was clutching a thick manila envelope as if it were a holy relic. "I have dirt on everyone, Carol," he said, his voice a desperate hiss. He tried to sound threatening, but the shaking in his hands gave him away. "On Arthur, on the board members, on everyone. If you and Arthur don't make these lawsuits go away, I'll release it all." It was his last resort, his insurance policy, the ammunition he had collected over years of manipulating and betraying people. I just laughed. The sound surprised even me. It was a real, genuine laugh, bubbling up from a place of pure liberation. "Go ahead, Roger," I said, walking slowly towards him. "Burn every single bridge you have left. Release it. Let's see how that works out for you." He looked stunned. He expected me to be afraid, to plead with him. His power had always been in my fear of him. Now that it was gone, he had nothing. In a fit of frustration, he threw the envelope at my feet. Its contents spilled onto the asphalt, photos, screenshots of private messages, all sorts of nasty little secrets. I bent down, picked up the scattered pages, and while he watched in utter disbelief, I took out my phone and took a clear, steady picture of every single page. Then I gathered them up, put them back in the envelope, and handed it back to him. "Release whatever you want," I said calmly, my voice even. "But first, take a good, long look at where your previous schemes got you." The thing about people like Roger, bullies and manipulators, is that they can't stand it when their own weapons are turned against them. They can't stand being powerless. He let out a scream of pure, impotent rage and tore the envelope to shreds right there in the parking lot, the little pieces of paper fluttering around him like toxic confetti. That tantrum? That final, pathetic meltdown? Someone from a nearby room recorded the whole thing on their phone. It was all over social media within hours, the final nail in his already sealed coffin. The final blow came yesterday. Arthur's divorce from Judith was finalized. And guess what? He got everything. The house, the cars, most of their shared assets. The prenuptial agreement was airtight. Judith's golden parachute from the company was gone, completely eaten up by her mounting legal fees. Her reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Her future career prospects? Let's just say Google is not her friend anymore. As for Roger, last I heard, he's still living with his parents in another state. His social media has gone dark. And those friends who so eagerly sided with him? Brenda and Dorothy are dealing with their own quiet fallout. It turns out, when you publicly and enthusiastically back the wrong horse, it has consequences. Your judgment comes into question. Brenda tried to apologize yesterday. She sent me this long, rambling message about how she should have been a better friend and how she was just confused by the situation. I just replied with a screenshot of her old messages supporting Roger's lies. She blocked me. Coward. I saw Dorothy at the grocery store last week. She saw me, her eyes widened, and she practically ran in the other direction, abandoning her shopping cart in the middle of the aisle. I almost feel bad for them. Almost. It's strange how quiet life gets when you finally remove all the noise. For the past month, since that final, pathetic scene in the motel parking lot, my life has been just that. Quiet. Peaceful. It's a quiet I had to fight for, and it's the most precious thing I own. Last week, I signed the lease on a new apartment. It's a small one-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood, with big windows that let in the morning sun. There's a little balcony, just big enough for a chair and a few pots of herbs. As I stood in the empty living room for the first time, the scent of fresh paint in the air and the keys feeling solid and real in my hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. This was mine. Just mine. No one else's history was in these walls. The process of moving was slow and therapeutic. I didn't have much to pack from the old apartment. I had sent Roger a single, curt email telling him he could keep everything. I didn't want any of it. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every book on the shelf was tainted with the memory of his lies. I wanted a fresh start, a complete one. I spent a weekend happily wandering through stores, buying new dishes, new towels, a new comfy armchair for the living room. Each item I chose felt like a small act of defiance, a small step forward, a reclaiming of my life and my taste. I even spent a frustrating but ultimately triumphant afternoon assembling a bookcase by myself, a small victory that felt huge. There have been other, bigger changes, too. At work, the cloud of suspicion that had been hanging over me disappeared overnight after the gala. My boss called me into his office and formally, and very humbly, apologized for the HR memo and for not questioning the narrative being pushed by Judith. And last Friday, he called me in again and offered me a promotion. A real one, the one I had been working towards for years, the one Judith had been blocking. It came with more responsibility, a better title, and a significant raise in my salary. It felt good. It felt earned. And yes, I'm seeing someone new. It's very new, and I'm taking it incredibly slow. His name is Mark, and he's a kind, gentle man I met through Eileen. He's a high school history teacher, and he has the calmest energy of anyone I've ever met. He knows a little bit about what happened, just the broad strokes, but he doesn't press for details. He just listens. We have coffee, we go for long walks in the park, we talk about books and history and our families. There's no drama, no games. It's just easy. And right now, easy is exactly what I need. Before I moved into my new place, I went back to the Starlight Inn one last time. I wanted to thank Pete properly. I bought him a nice bottle of bourbon as a gift. He was sitting in his little office, watching an old western on his small TV. He just smiled his kind, tired smile when he saw me. "Told you had a strong chin, kid," he said, accepting the bottle. "Glad to see you landing on your feet." We sat in his office for a while, just talking, and I told him how much his quiet, unquestioning kindness had meant to me when I felt like the whole world was against me. He just shrugged. "Everyone needs a safe harbor in a storm," he said. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm sitting in my new armchair in my quiet apartment, I think about Roger and Judith. I don't feel anger anymore. I don't feel hatred. I just feel a sort of detached pity. Their whole lives were built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and causing pain to others. And in the end, it all came crashing down around them, as structures built on such weak foundations always do. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't about plotting or scheming. It's not about an eye for an eye. It's about living well. It's about being so happy and so at peace with your own life, so focused on your own growth and joy, that you don't have time to look back at the ashes of the bridges they burned. But I won't lie to you. Watching it all go up in flames was pretty satisfying, too. This will be my last update on this whole saga. Thank you all for coming along for the ride, for listening to my story. Thank you for your support, for your comments, for being here with me. Remember, karma doesn't always need your help. Sometimes, you just need to step back, get out of the way, and let people show their true colors. They will do the destructive work for you. Thank you for being here with me. If my story resonated with you, if it gave you a little bit of hope or strength, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it. You never know who might need to hear that it's possible to walk through the fire and come out stronger and more whole on the other side. Take care of yourselves.